Awesome. We are live. This is cool. This is the final book. Conversation about the final book. There you go. I haven't had coffee this morning. Of Winter the Witch of the Winternight Trilogy by Catherine Arden. I have a cast of wonderful panelists with me, who I will let them introduce themselves very shortly. All of their information is linked down below in the description, so you can always go subscribe to them right now, even before they introduce themselves. But before we get that, and before we get to that and to the discussion, I wanted to say at the forefront, so you don't have to watch an hour of footage later, I'm going to do a giveaway of the Fairy Loot editions of the Winternight Trilogy, this entire thing. It's not signed, don't get too excited. So if you go to the Discord that's linked down below, there are roles and settings set up. So if you would like to enter that giveaway, go to the Discord and there are instructions there. And then also, we are going to be starting a read-along of the, Seven Waters trilogy. There you go. I had to think about it for a second. Starting with Daughter of the Forest by Juliette Marillier. That will start in March. Sarah from Sarah Reads, Yolene from Yolene Reads, and I are trying to figure out like where stuff is going to be hosted, live shows, all that stuff. But for sure, we're all three going to be hosting that trilogy read-along. And if we like it, continue with the second trilogy, but we'll cross that bridge when we get to it. Additionally, considering the conversations or the current events and some actions and content of this book, considering it deals with war and battles and the repercussions of that, considering current events, we're going to try and limit the discussion to as it relates to the book. But just know that I think I can speak for all of us that current events with Ukraine and stuff like that are in everybody's mind, and we are hoping for the best situation for everybody and everyone stay safe. So on that very somber note, I'm going to let everybody introduce themselves. Directions. Kayla, if you want to start.
All right. So my name is Kayla. I read books and I talk about them on various places on the internet. And yeah, I am very excited to talk about this one today.
I'm Lana. I also read books. Excuse me, it's very late here. I also read books and talk about them in various places on the internet intermittently. My channel is Lauren Lullabies, and yeah.
Hi, my name is Lola, and I am Italian. I live in the mountains, and I also do read books. A surprise! I have reread the Winternight Trilogy twice, and it's one of my favorite series ever. So that's what you can expect from me.
Hey, hi, I'm Joanna from the channel Joanna, and on my channel, I read books, I talk about bookish topics, I have discussions sometimes, but I am so excited today to talk about this book because I had such a wonderful experience and just so honored to be here. So thank you for having me, Evie.
Hi, I'm Kate. My channel is Kate Coy. I talk about fantasy, mostly a bit of history. Obviously read books. Winternight has been one of my favorites for a while, so I'm really excited to be on here as well. So thank you, Evie.
Hi, I'm Roger. I collect books and try to keep up with reading everything that I have.
Touche.
And I just read Winternight Trilogy for the first time in December and January. I read the first book and then was hooked and read the other two immediately following within like a 2-week period.
So annual reread, that's what I'm hearing. All right, cool. So let's I guess start with the beginning. Like similar to, well, I should preface this. Spoilers, we're just gonna go into spoilers. Like we're not even gonna worry about spoiler free, because at this point, if you're here and you haven't read the books, what are you doing here? Just go read the books. Just please go read the books. So with that, similar to the second book, The Girl in the Tower, doesn't start off with Vasya. So, I mean, the chapter title I think is Maria. Yeah, Maria. So, did you like the starting off with someone other than Vasya again? Are you kind of like, I don't know, primed for it with the second book, or any thoughts on that?
Well, I'll start off. Personally, Vasya is one of my favorite characters ever, but I must say that my favorite character of this series is the atmosphere. So I think that Catherine Arden does always an outstanding job at just fleshing out and portraying the atmosphere, no matter what character is giving us the story or their perspective. So personally, I do not have a problem with whoever starts off the book because I'm always there for anything.
And I think she carries it very, I wouldn't say it's a cliffhanger in the second book, but the action starts off pretty much immediately from the end of the second book, which is different from, the from book 1 to book 2. I think there's a little bit of a time span. So
I think that book 1 was more built to eventually things went bad to kind of be its own thing, but then book 2 and book 3 obviously expanded differently. And I don't know, I am so sucked into this world every single time, and I just want to know everything from everyone's point of view in every single moment. And I don't know, she just does an incredible job at making you invested all around, in my opinion.
Yeah.
Would you consider this an omniscient narrator? Is this considered an omniscient narration style? Because I've often heard that is the case, and I felt that more in the first book. In the first book, I felt as though I was kind of like hovering from character thought to character thought, from character to character. I didn't feel like I was zoomed in on necessarily anyone until it finally started to zoom in on Vasya. And then it became more and more Vasya's story. I had to remind myself when you just said that we started off with Maria at the beginning of the books. I just did not even remember that. I'm actually surprised that we didn't get more Maria in this book, as well as some of the other characters that were introduced in previous books. But I didn't really have a problem with that, honestly, either. I really did feel, though, that Vasya was at the heart of the book, but everything, of course, happening around her was also essential as well. So I like what Ola said about the atmosphere as well.
Yeah, I think it is. I would consider it like limited omniscient in a way. I think whoever's in the scene, I think Arden does a really good job of like blending perspectives, and making it seem it doesn't seem like it's like, oh, we're in Vasya's head, oh, we're in Olga's head, or whatever. It just seems very natural and seamless in a way.
Mm-hmm.
But
yeah,
it seems like a common theme between all three to set up with different perspectives and then trail into the main character and the main story.
Yeah. And also, I think it's a particularly cool that she chose Maria for this one, since I think that Maria, in many ways, is a different version of what Vasya could have been. And so it's like starting off with Vasya if she was in a different context. If she had a different past and different story and different future, of course.
Yeah.
That's such a good point, because I think that something else that I don't feel like, well, I feel is there, but sometimes I have to remind myself it's there, is that this is very much also a generational story, or it talks about generations. Yeah. It talks about the past and where Vasya making decisions different from those who came before her, and then showing that the story doesn't necessarily end, or the lineage doesn't just end with Vasya either. So I think it is important to have Maria in the story because of that too.
Mm.
I am not going to lie. I don't remember Maria's perspective after the trauma that this rude author put me through, like almost immediately in this book. So I'm like, wait, Maria, but Solveig.
All right, let's just jump to that then, I guess. That absolute and utter sob fest I will say that I suspected something was going to happen because in the
I
book
didn't
club
want to
that-
believe it. I didn't know.
yeah, in the book club that I was in when I was reading The Bear and the Nightingale, someone pointed out the prophecy and was like, "Oh yeah, this is gonna. I wonder if this is gonna happen to this character." And I didn't pick up on it, and then I was like, "Oh, what?" So
Same.
I suspected something was going to happen. I just didn't know when. And then it happened, and then just the description of Solovey's death just destroyed me. And I was so angry, and I was sending voice messages to Angela, sobbing my eyes out. Yeah, I'm pretty sure it's incoherent. I would assume that we all had similar reactions.
Twice.
Yeah. Like, again, knowing it was gonna happen still was like, yeah, it's awful. But I will say the thing that I enjoyed, especially on reread, because I wasn't so like, oh my god, is the depiction of, like, he might be gone, but he's not gone. Like, Vasya is carrying him throughout the story with grief and kind of comparing everyone to him, and he's still around, which is very nice, I think.
I think so too. I mean, I hope it's okay if I jump ahead a little bit, but something that I found really interesting in this book was, there's that whole romantic scene with Morozko and Vasya. And I thought that was a beautiful scene for one, but I also love how this also feels like a slight critique of fairy tale stories, because after that scene, they're walking together through the forest, and she just suddenly has a moment of grief remembering Solovey. And it's like, you could have this beautiful romantic sort of thing, but then that stuff is still real and it's still there with her. She's still carrying it. And so I appreciated that. I actually appreciated that.
Same. I liked it because, like, usually, and also I read a lot of romance and like romanticy. So that is so often what happens. Like, this big traumatic thing happens, and then there's like a romantic scene, and then it's all forgotten. I'm just like, that's not how life works. And I just loved how nuanced it was in this book. It was beautiful.
Yes.
And I just appreciated that it also didn't like take Vasya's agency away, because I feel like in a lot of fantasy, once they couple, then like especially the female character tends to seem to lose their agency, and they're just part of this couple now. And she was like, "No, sir."
Absolutely agree with you. And when there are instances, especially towards the end, when Vasya has to make choices, they go against Morozko many times, and he even confronts her, and she's like, "Nope, I decided that. That's what I think it's good." Awesome character.
Yeah, agreed. And I kind of like that they don't. I feel like sometimes when you have this sort of godlike romantic figure, they get along too easily and they have the same worldview. And I like that this really, you can see the different worldview between Vasya and Morozko and kind of how they struggle to work that out between themselves. I thought that was really neat.
Yeah.
What about you, Kayla? I know we completely switched gears.
It's all good. For the grieving part, I actually like that she had that physical token of the bird to carry with her, and she didn't forget about it. She was very mindful of carrying it with her, as well as the mental aspect of the grief. For the relationship between her and Morozko, I think it was, I just have to echo what everyone else said, really, because I like that she kept her own strength, her own individuality, rather than losing herself in essentially a fairy tale god.
Yeah, to be to provide a little bit of, I guess, non-gushing, I have to admit that, especially on reread, I was a bit frustrated with the bathhouse scene between Morozko and Vasya, because for me it seemed like, oh, the only way to get him to remember is have this, intimate relationship with him, which I can see making sense, and I think Arden did it tastefully. but it's still, I don't know why, but I'm like, there was other ways that she could have made him remember, but it just happened to be like, oh, if I have sex with him, then he'll remember. But on the flip side, I did like the commentary on like female and women's sexuality. That she, as you guys said, like Vasya takes the reins and like has her own agency, and I think it's not entirely wrapped up in pleasing him, I guess, in a way. She actively is like, I want this. This is what I want. I'm going to, not do it, but like offer, and then it's like an active participant, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Well, weren't there multiple times where Morosco kept trying to say, like, just come away with me? And she's like, no, I've got people to protect. Like,
Yeah.
this isn't over. I've
Right.
got things I have to do. I can't just disappear.
Right.
About that scene, my interpretation of that was always how the fact that Morosco is imprisoned in this weird world is kind of described as a mental cage, where it's easy to keep someone trapped in something that they like and to create a prison that they can enjoy because they do not want to escape that prison. So my reaction to that was Vazia found something that was so high in emotion and in all the senses, kind of, to break that mental cage. But I don't know, maybe this is my interpretation of that, and I totally see your critique to that, and I understand that there are so many other ways that probably she could have pulled it off. I am not that good, so I can't think of any.
That's interesting. I hadn't thought about it either. I hadn't thought about it that way. I feel like I'm going to have to pay attention to that when I reread it. But I want to just add to what you all were saying too, because as far as her agency there, because I know that I was kind of heartbroken when she's reflecting on how not Dunya, Anna, is it Anna, her stepmother, had told her and her stepsister some horror stories about what men and women do on their wedding nights. And wow, I felt so heartbroken for her to have grown up with that trauma. And then for me, I felt happy that she was able to sort of have it be consensual in that moment.
Yeah.
Yes, absolutely.
To go back though, so this, we start off with Maria, and then I feel like we have to talk about Constantine and the mob and going after Vasya.
Just his name just incites so much anger.
Yes.
Yeah, he's one of the, I don't want to say, well, he is complex. He's a complex villain, but like, he's one of the best antagonists that I've read in probably ever, because you understand his motivations. And I mean, I actually felt bad for him, like at the middle way part, like oh man, I actually feel sad that, with all he's gone through.
I'm loving
Right.
Lana's reaction, sorry.
Nope.
No, I was more like, yeah, screw you.
But he's back in the picture. He's inciting a mob, and but at the same time, like, you hate what he's doing, but it really kind of starts Vasya off on her journey for this book in a way, I think.
I feel like he's had a lot of, like, in the first book, like, from what he did, that started her off on, like, a journey. So, like, I feel like a lot of things that, like, his actions have caused Vasya to go off and do whatever she's had to do.
I
But I
think
feel
that
like
there
he
are
was
some
just
people.
a big...
Yeah, sorry, I thought that you were.
No, I'm good. I'm done.
I think there are some people, and Constantine's one of them, who fear what they don't understand. And if they can't have it their way, they are going to abuse others until they get it their way in order to destroy them. But there's an exception there, and people like Vazia are that exception, and those are the people where will use the strength that they need to harness to go through that to start their journey. And that's what Constantine actually do with that you were saying, Evie. And it's an intentional, it's exactly the opposite of what he wanted to do. And I think that he's one of the best villains ever, probably my favorite villain, meaning that I hate him deeply, deeply, deeply. And that's why he's a great villain, in my opinion. And the moment where it probably gets the most interesting part is with his conversation with Meatbit.
Yeah.
So I want to go off what Ola said for a second there, because I totally agree with you, Ola. I was actually thinking that I almost see, I don't know if this is exactly what you're saying, but I almost see Constantine and Vasya as being sort of opposites in a way, because okay, so unpopular opinion, I agree with Evie, I guess, because I actually did feel sympathy for Constantine. And the reason why is because I feel like Catherine Arden makes it really clear from book one that this is a man who is reacting on his unconscious fears and desires, that he doesn't know what he wants. And he represses his fear so much. It's just like fear on top of fear on top of fear. And I do think it is rooted. And I'm not saying what I love about this book and this trilogy is it gives a critique of religion and at the same time shows a lighter side of religion too. It shows it how it can go both ways. But in Constantine's case, I feel as though Catherine Arden is showing the dark side of religion, showing him how he is using religion as sort of like a structure to hold on to and not face himself and not be honest with himself and as a result, it just leads him further and further and further down this dark spiral. And with Vasya, one of the messages you constantly hear throughout this book, and it even comes from Morosco, and it's part of their argument with each other. And I love it. I love their arguments with each other throughout the book too. They're both such strong characters, and it's incredible to see their interplay. But one of the biggest arguments against Vasya throughout this trilogy from Morosco and from her family is that magic will make you crazy. And so, sorry, backtracking a little bit. I did talk about this in my video about this, but one of the critiques I had when I started this trilogy was this idea that magic is just believing in something enough until it becomes a reality. And I just thought that was way simplistic and way too childish for me in a way. And then this book totally flipped that thought because it shows you the consequence of that. It shows you the dark side of that. It shows you, yes, maybe there are infinite possibilities with magic if you could tap into that, but you could also lose yourself. You can go crazy. And people are so powerful that they have that potential to just lose themselves, to break their minds. And I mean, Morosco tells her, if you do this for long enough, you're going to bend your mind until it breaks. But she chooses, unlike Constantine. So they're both kind of after power. But with Constantine, he's going after power out of an unconscious desire because it's wrong and bad in his religion to want what he wants. So he's not facing that and he's not being conscious of it. And he keeps hiding from it and he keeps repressing himself and spiraling. Vasya is clear that she wants power, and she's even clear that it's not always coming from the best intention all the time, but she uses it with purpose. And sometimes that's not always good, as we learn at the end, or even in the beginning at the end of the second book. It's not always good because she robs power from other people, like what she did with Olga and what she tries to do at the end with Stasha. So she's constantly trying to take charge of power and to save her country, to save her people, to save her family. But she does it with a consciousness. She does it with a clearness. And I think that is the reason why Vasya doesn't go crazy, unlike her ancestors. I think that is why she maintains that control. That's my theory anyway. And with Constantine, I'm sorry I'm talking so much, but with Constantine, I feel as though when he, towards the end, I felt so heartbroken for him that he realized, he saw what Sasha was able to do with prayer. And he turns to the bear and said, I thought that, you lied to me. You told me that God wasn't real. And of course the bear says, there is no God, or God isn't real or something. Faith is real. But he feels so betrayed. But it really is kind of it was all him all along. It's just he never could face those fears. He could never face himself. So I actually do, even though I know he's horrible and I hated him, I still felt sympathy for him too. I still felt I understood him. I know that's very unpopular, but I love the way Catherine Arden wrote that character.
Yeah, I think to kind of continue the conversation about like power structures, I think that's one of the overall themes of the trilogy is just power and how you use it. And for me, Vasya, the difference between Vasya and Constantine is not only that Constantine is driven by these unconscious fears, but like his power, and he sees that he gets power through other people, through power over other people, whether it's be the mob mentality and their fears of Vasya as a witch, or fears of, not worshiping God in a way, in the way that he thinks is appropriate. Whereas Vasya, she gets her power just from herself. And she does have that moment, if I recall correctly, there is that scene where she almost completely succumbs to madness as she's using magic and developing her powers. But I can't remember what it was that kind of like snapped her out of it in a way. But like she is on the brink of just toppling over into madness, and then she kind of comes back through kind of her own will in a way.
Yeah, isn't that super powerful? Because it shows that you can try, you can push it, but if you have the strength to pick yourself up, like you should not be as, it's like a common
Reckless.
way to say it. Even if you fall, you can always stand up and try again. That's basically the thing. If you know that you're strong enough to stand up again, basically. I think that Vasya is a lot of that. And when you were talking about Vasya having her power from herself, I also think that one of the other places that she gets her power from is a lot from nature and all the spirits or sprites or other creatures of the nature and magical world, which I think it's a beautiful theme when it comes to basically, if you will, shared energy that is given willingly, and it's not something that has been manipulated or used in a way as Constantine does. And I think that that's the difference with their kind of power.
Yeah, and I was going to say too, I think one of the other differences that I saw even more on a reread with this is how much Vasya connects with her family and the people around her, and allows them to support her, and like her close connections with Olga and with Sasha. And Constantine just kind of never has that connection with people. He uses people, but he never has a connection that kind of draws him back to himself the way Vasya does. So again, I do feel sympathy for him because he doesn't understand how to really connect with people. So that ends up really hurting him in the end.
That's actually really funny, like that I completely forgot. But while I was reading this series, I think I talked to my family like more often than I have in like the last 2 years, because there's such a family connection in this. And I was like, while I was reading it, I must have just been longing for that connection that I was reading. So I was just like, hey mom, what's happening? Like,
yeah.
And it's so powerful that a book can do that.
I think I also just appreciated that she didn't try to give him like a literal redemption arc where he wasn't like, oh, I realize I'm like, you know what I mean? And he didn't like start trying to like help necessarily. I appreciated that he was a more like realistic type character where I feel like we all have probably met somebody somewhat like Constantine, where we can see like those pathways of like, you're a little deluded, you're a little crazy, you do messed up things for messed up reasons, but he never had like this. He did have like that tragic moment where he was realizing that he was lied to at the end, but he never like totally flipped script and was like trying to help Vasya or anything like that. Really, it didn't feel like to me. So I just appreciated also that she always had like two villains, because there was like the split spirit world and then the human world, and we always had the human villain and the spiritual villain. It kind of just underlied that like dichotomy of the world.
Yeah.
And I just found it super compelling.
Yeah, and I think the way that she was able to kind of not make him kind of flip script, as you put it, is that he is so complex. Like you understand his fears and his uncertainties, and like he's not a mustache twirling villain. You know, he is very, very real. So I think that's how she was able to do that in a way.
I would like to add on what you said, Roger, that the fact that she put actually a villain for both worlds, but also good people for both worlds, because you have, just to mention too, Sasha and Basia, obviously, they are very distinct in their beliefs, in what they want to do, they want to achieve. But that was exactly what I needed to have a book that was, yes, criticizing Christianity and religion and all of that, but not like demonizing it. It's not something bad. It's just showing two sides of two worlds that can be both good and bad, no matter what. There's good and bad in everything, basically. And I thought that she did such a great job at that, because I know that some people criticize, especially book one, for being too harsh against religion, which personally was not my experience, but I also have my life that we don't talk about that. But I understand that. I think that the other books really do the work to show what she was trying to do also in book one, but maybe was a little bit more subdued.
Yeah, I think you know, that critique of being anti-religious or organized religion or whatever, it's really it's the critique is the people and how people use things, whether it be religion or their own powers or whatever. And you know, you can use religion, you can use you know, money or government as a way to take over people, which is another thing, like an aspect that I didn't expect to like about this series, is the incorporation of like historical medieval Russia, like Dmitri and stuff like that. So yeah, I really liked that. But
Yeah, I love that. As kind of a history nerd, it was super fun. And she actually has a recommendation for like a book on medieval Russia at the end of it. And I recently picked it up, and it's funny because you flip to the section that like she's pulling from, and they're all there, like all these names that she has pulled into this story. So it just blew me away. I thought it was amazing.
Yeah,
That's cool.
I really appreciated that too.
Yeah, and it made it feel more real in a way. Like it didn't feel, she weaved everything very, very well together. It didn't feel like, oh, this is historical fiction and this is like a fantasy. It's like, no, it's
Yeah, especially because it's not just like names, it's also all these historical details about like the way they lived, and like all of this terminology that's alien if you're coming from like current, like especially America is totally different from the way like my daily life is, but you can really feel immersed in that, and I loved that.
Yeah. Any thoughts, Kayla?
Well, with respect to Constantine, I found that as much as he was fearful and desired control and power, he gave up control quite a bit to other people who kept promising him what he wanted. So just the irony that he kept wanting to be in control, he kept wanting all this praise, but he kept giving away his choices, his ability to choose how to go about all these things to other people, and letting them kind of set the stage for what they ultimately wanted, regardless of him, and using him as a tool was kind of bittersweet in the end, considering his whole arc.
And he hated himself. That was another thing too. He absolutely hated himself.
He wasn't alone.
Yeah.
I hated him too.
Yeah, no, I think it's interesting because like he just so happened to be in religion. Like I think if he picked any other, I don't know, avenue of a livelihood, that he would have been in the same position, because he doesn't take, what's the phrase? If you don't stand for anything, you fall for everything. I think that's the
Mm.
phrase. And I think he's really truly the embodiment of that, where he, again, to juxtapose him against Vasya, like Vasya is very self-assured. She knows herself, even though she's still growing and she still needs to grow. She's very confident and self-assured, where Constantine is not. And so he is susceptible to, influences that will give him what he thinks he wants. I think.
Well, it
Yeah.
felt
And I
more
think
like he
it
ended
relies
up in
too much on
religion.
power. Sorry.
Oh, you're fine. I feel like he ended up in religion more because he wanted power more so than he wanted the religion, and that was just the institution at the time that gave him that feeling of power.
I can
Right.
tell you also nowadays, if living in Italy, I mean, religion is still like a very powerful group.
Yeah.
And yeah, I was
Yeah.
I don't
just
know.
about to say the same thing, by the way.
I mean, I saw that. So it's very clear to me that he, and I'm sorry, I'm like the Constantine defender, devil's advocate here. But I understand that. And I definitely saw, obviously, his lust for power and control. But I always think there's a deeper motivation when somebody is lusting for power and control. And in his case, I can't remember who brought up his loneliness. I'm sorry. One of you brought up his loneliness, how he didn't have family and connection the way that Vasya did. And I think that's such an interesting point because we do get moments, and the only reason I say this and why I don't think it was all just power is that we do see moments where he's by himself in this trilogy and he's praying and he and he doesn't understand the silence. The silence to him almost like, whereas I think in some religious interpretations, that silence can be sort of like, it can go along with peace. It can go along with a sort of presence. For him, that silence, in my mind, when I was seeing through his eyes, I felt like that silence was almost like an abandonment.
Yeah.
And so I think that drove him again. And I think it's not like he knew his fears. He was unconsciously driven by these sort of unworthiness fears. He knew enough, I think, to know that he hated himself and that for whatever reason, Vasya was bringing up that self-hatred in him even more. But yeah, I don't know. I guess I just see other layers there. And it's hard than, I guess, that limited omniscient narration style. We're not necessarily getting deep into his head, I guess, but I still feel like there could be layers there. Yeah.
Yeah, I 100% agree on the layers. Like, while I was reading, I felt like he turned to the church because, like someone said before, it was like a blanket, like a pillar, somewhere that he could lean on. And like, I had in my head that he was either abandoned by his family or he lost his family in some way, because the church is like a family, kind of. And then from there, like having those like abandonment issues or lack of self like awareness and how he sees himself and like not having power over certain things made him crave that power and just like turned him into what he became.
Yeah.
That's interesting too, because the church requires that you do that, doesn't it? When you go into priesthood and stuff, you marry the church.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I remember Igor saying that in the Eastern Orthodox Christianity, like priests are expected to marry. So
Okay.
So like I know that we talked about, like, I think at the first book, like there was thoughts of maybe like was Arden setting it up that Constantine wanted to marry Vasya or something like that. So that's another aspect of it as well, which is pretty interesting.
Yeah, I don't think that, honestly, for a second. I think that the problem with Constantine was that he saw in Vasya what he was not able to be himself.
Yeah.
And that made him mad, let's call it.
Yeah.
And the other thing, that going back to what we were saying before, how Catherine Arden did not try to give him a redemption arc and make it like insane him, it's the most important thing, because it is important that we are able to find some kind of sympathy or compassion for this man that is awful, but that does not excuse any of the awful stuff that he does.
No.
And even though he might have had some rough stuff in his past and being abandoned, all of that, just because you are abused, you are not allowed to abuse others. And that's the point. And I so appreciate how Catherine Arden did that, because she showed compassion, she showed all the things, but she never excused the man. So that's absolutely great, because that's the layer that we need, in my opinion.
Yeah, I hope when I'm saying that I see layers and I have sympathy for this man, I'm not condoning anything he did.
Don't worry, we're not hating on you. We're not judging you.
You're judging Constantine. That's different.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, Joanna, I got you back. We're good. So one of the things that I was struck by, not only with I was trying to find the quote, the scene here. When Constantine dies, he's with Medved. He kind of gets, I don't want to say a redemption arc, but like Medved and Constantine have this, you see them differently in a way.
Yes.
Because it says like, Constantine stared, but Vasya could not tell what he was looking at. Perhaps he was seeing the face above him being Medved, a creature he loved and reviled as he loved and reviled himself. And Medved says, "I'm vanquished, man of God." Like, it's so he was able. I don't know. That scene just, I feel like, says a lot, but I'm still trying to kind of comprehend it even now. But I think it does say a lot. I will say that I think the places where you see Constantine without as many fears or struggles or influences, and is when he's making the how do you say it? The iconistus? The icon screens.
Iconostasis, yeah.
Yeah, there you go. And I think, that's a way for him to
release.
Yeah.
And be honest with himself.
Yeah. Because, you see his fears, at least in the first book, because he starts making that icon screen and one of the characters starts looking like Vasya. But as, he's able to kind of, it's just be him.
Yes.
And to kind of put it back to that scene is Medved really, I think he says specifically, like, I saw your icons, like, that he loved them. Yes. So I thought that was really nice in a way, I guess. Again, I'm still trying to like wrap my head around it because I feel like there's a lot there.
That's the moment where I felt the most sympathy and compassion to him, because it's like in my head, if you could have gone that path and just done his icons his whole life, he could have tapped into his own real self, being himself. And like, creativity is such a releasing tool, and he could have worked it out, in my opinion, but he did not. He was pursuing power instead of art, in a way. I'm overly simplifying it, so forgive me.
Me with karma, I was like, ha! You should feel bad, jerk.
I was so conflicted in that scene because I was the same. I was just like, ha, good riddance, like, about time. But then I was also like, when he was struck with the realization that, like, the power of faith, and I like kind of felt bad for him, but at the same time I was just like, oh, bye. And then like another layer on top of that was Medved mourning him, and that's where my like thought on Medved as a character changed. And I was just like, huh, you're not just this like evil being thing for the fun of it. Like, there is method to your madness or chaos.
I thought it was really interesting that a little ways after that, Vasya is reflecting on that, and she's kind of having the same exact experience. Like, wow, he actually mourned Constantine, and this is, Medved. And then Morosko says to her, well, even the wicked can grieve, Vasya. And I almost felt like by him saying that, it's like, don't forget he's still wicked. I don't know. It was interesting. I wish I could interview Catherine Arden. I just want to hear more of her thoughts on morality, because I feel like this is such an interesting exploration on it.
I think that something that to me explain it perfectly is when Lady Midnight tells Vazia that she cannot choose between good and bad. Basically, I'm just paraphrasing it because of course. But that's very true, because there is nothing that is completely good and completely bad. So it's impossible to make that choice. It's always a gray mix of something. So that to me is what it means. Like, even if it's chaos, maybe it's a bad person, did some awful stuff, they can still grieve, they can still have feelings and all of that. You can't choose between good and bad. That's all.
Yeah, there are no absolutes in life.
Yeah, because sorry, go ahead.
Oh no, I was just hiccuping. Sorry.
Okay, because I was going to say another, because related to that grieving, there's another passage where Morosco is talking about how the connection between love and grief, that you can't have, that's what makes him, and that's what's so beautiful about that relationship between Vasya and Morosco. I'd love to hear your all thoughts about that, because because I just think it's also beautiful that he tries, it says in the book how she shreds apart his indifference. And then that's such a powerful thing, because Morosco represents death. And of course, if you live forever, if you're this winter demon, you probably are going to want to stay indifferent, because man, how uncomfortable to feel everything. Yeah, to feel grief, to feel love, to feel all those things. And she gets him to feel again. And it's, and that's so painful. That's so hard. But anyway, just thought it was interesting to connect that, because obviously grieving means love. And that's something I think she really brings out in this book.
Yeah, I think it's, I can't remember if it was in this book or one of the previous two, but I think Morosco mentions something or alludes to the fact that man created like him as a winter king, and it's their belief and stuff like that that keeps them alive.
Yes.
And there's this idea, I think, that death or frost or what have you is this awful, scary thing. And it's, I think for me, with thinking of Morosco, like, he's not this awful, scary thing. Like, he's like frost. Like, it's just something that slowly comes upon you. It's not a, sudden thing. I don't know if I'm making sense, but like, I don't know. I just like the way that she portrayed it, and there's a lot of like nuance and stuff that I'm thinking about. So
that's a cool connotation I hadn't thought of before. Yeah.
So but what was I gonna say? Oh yes, so grieving. It's so we have Vasya grieving Solovey. We have Olga grieving her child. We have Medved grieving Konstantin. Sorry, that was my dog in case you heard it sigh. But then Vasya gets control physically over Medved. And they're both kind of on these parallel paths in a way, I think. And that leads into the second half of the book, or about second half of the book. Because I think it's interesting, there's like two endings to this book. There's the Konstantin Medved, him being vanquished, and then the actual end. So, and then the other, that leads to the other grief of Sasha, which that scene broke me.
Yep.
Yeah.
That broke me too.
But it was kind of bittersweet, I think.
Yes, absolutely.
Because she offers him the ability to come back. Oh, hey, Urza. Heyo. She wants him to come back, and he's like, no, I've made my decision. And I think that's that's another thing is like in the first book, Vasia's dad makes the choice to sacrifice himself, but she's like, no, he shouldn't have made that choice. And then in the second book, Vasia makes this choice to save her sister rather than her sister's child. And then in this third book, Vasia gives Sasha the choice, like, no, you need to take this. He's like, no, I'm making my choice for me. You're not going to make it for me. So it's really interesting play of choices.
Yeah.
But then we get Solveig back.
Yes.
So it's, you know.
And I also think it says a lot about Vasia and her growth when she is finally able to accept that someone else can make this choice that will hurt her, but it's the best thing for them. And clearly it is because respecting someone's will and consent is the best thing, because there's that.
Yeah, I mean, it just again goes back to that flip side between Vasya and Constantine, you know, because he could have made a choice, like you said, Ola, earlier, and he didn't. He chose power. And in this case, Vasya could have chosen power anyway, as she did for Olga. She made a mistake before. That's the thing I love about this book and this character, Vasya, is she is flawed and she makes mistakes, but she does learn and she does grow. And such that ending, that broke me so much. So good. And I knew. Did you all know that Sasha was going to die? Because I'm the worst when it comes to predicting anything in books. But I was like, oh yeah, he's going to die. I knew it. He was going to die. And
I didn't know. Well, obviously the first time I didn't know. I didn't expect it. I think I was still too traumatized by Solveig, so I was just like, I don't care about anybody.
I'm sorry. Why is just book Italian? Sorry.
What?
I said esatto instead of exactly, and I don't know why I just spoke Italian.
I understand.
You're Italian, that's why.
Yeah.
But yeah, like, I don't know, just because we're coming up on an hour, and I know it's almost 1 a.m. for you, Lana, and I don't want to, like...
I'm loving this.
Oh, okay, good. All right, we'll carry on for hours on end, because there's so much stuff, because we haven't even touched on, like, Dimitri, or, you know, we kind of talked about Lady Midnight, but, like, we haven't even talked about Vasya going into the Midnight Roads, and, like, Dead Grib. So cute. I feel like he was a consolation prize, in a way. Like, he filled the void that Solveig had. So while she's still grieving, you get this little mushroom.
I want a plushie of him. Yes. So bad.
Agreed, Urza, killing animals in books is not okay.
Especially it's the horses. It's always the damn horses and like the movies and everything. You're like, no, stop killing the horses.
Yeah. Never-ending story, anyone?
Oh god.
Yeah.
As a side note, I remember watching Twister in theaters, and I remember crying. Like, mind you, I was like maybe 10, 11 years old at the time. I don't even remember what year it came out. But anyways, we saw it in theaters, and I remember crying, thinking, as I'm watching the horses like run away from the Twister, and I'm like, no, don't get the horses. Yeah. And they were fine. But like, I was more worried about the horses than... No one cares about the cow, Urza. It's the horses.
I do.
In Twister, there's a cow that like, oh, there's a cow, and it's like, you know, in the Twister, and it goes to there. Anywho, that's an aside. But yeah, it's what were we talking about? I totally lost.
We were touching upon the fact that we did not touch upon yet on Lady Midnight and going into the world of Midnight and all of that, and then we started talking about horses and little mushrooms.
Yes. Yeah, it's again, there's so much that happens within this book that it somehow does not feel rushed at all. And it doesn't feel, I don't know, I totally forgot how much happens in this book.
There's a lot that happens. Just speaking of that Lady Midnight scene, though, I thought that was interesting too, because there were limitations, like just the way that kind of realm worked. this sort of realm of midnights that you could sort of travel through but get lost in. And I thought that was, I don't know. Yeah, you're right. It almost seems to weave in. It almost felt like its own short story in a way.
Okay, so I'll tell you my thoughts about the world of Midnight. It's probably the most interesting part for me of this book, even though I love it all. It really feels like a journey within the subconscious and how you can get lost and you can solve things and you can make things worse. You can be trapped in your mind, as Morosco happens to do, and you can save yourself and someone else trapped in your mind or in their mind, tackling all that stuff. And it feels like it gives you free reign with your willpower if you have enough creativity and doing things in maybe unconventional way, if you will, which still has its kind of rules, but they are much more flexible. And that made it super interesting, especially because it was not like necessarily a happy place. It felt very dangerous, but also realistic. And I don't know, I think it was so complex and so full of metaphors and allegories. And I thought it was absolutely brilliant.
Yeah, I'm like torn on that part because like I wanted her to stay and learn more from Baba Yaga, but I also appreciated that we didn't
Yes.
know more about what was going on. So it's just like she really played that line like super well, where we got to see some of the cool stuff with the seasons and like the dude in the lake that tried to like capture her and stuff like that, but she never like pulled back the veil to like take away some of the mystery and like magicalness of it. But I also wanted to know more.
Yes.
You know what would be super cool if she ever wrote like a collection of short stories surrounding some specific characters that we never got to fully see. I would, oh my God, please, let's manifest this all together because I need it.
Even a novella, it'd be neat to have a Lady Midnight novella or something like that.
I want a collection of all the characters that I want more from.
Yeah, I just want more from this author. I know this wasn't written that long ago, but do any of you know if she's written any other books?
Yeah, she has a collection of middle grades.
Yeah,
Oh,
she has it's 4 middle grade books, and I think she's working on a adult. I don't know if it's fantasy, but it's like World War I inspired. I think.
Oh, interesting.
I'm
Okay.
stoked
And she's
for that.
also in the middle of that
Kate
like
is happy.
Oh yeah,
is that YA horror series.
Yeah, that's the middle grade
that's
one.
the middle grade one. Yeah.
Is it middle grade?
Yeah.
Mhm. Yeah, it definitely feels like middle grade. It's good, but don't go in expecting Winternight because it's very different.
Yeah.
I mean, I've read the 3 that are out.
Oh. I have them, but I have not read them yet.
2 is the best one of them. I'm not gonna lie though. 3 was whatever.
Yeah, I liked them. I just didn't love them quite as much as Winternight.
All right, sounds like we all need to be writing our own fan fiction about the Midnight Road the characters. Oh, sorry, I thought I saw a chat thing, but yeah. So you brought up Baba Yaga, and I did not expect Varvara to be related to Vasya in any way, shape, or form.
No.
And I loved how it all like you read it and it's like, oh crap, and then you in hindsight it's like, oh, it all makes sense that Varvara is Tamara's sister and all this stuff, and how I guess Varvara is in a way kind of another juxtaposition of like Vasya and Maria versus like Varvara and Tamara.
Yeah. Well said.
It's really nice, really cool.
Well said. I like that scene where we learn a little bit more about her too. I went ahead and highlighted this one part because Vasya is asking her, why be a servant though? She keeps asking her that. And then Varvara says, servants have more freedom than noble women. I could walk about as I wished, go into the sun with my head uncovered. I was happy. Witches die alone. My mother and sister showed me that. Has your gift brought you any happiness, Fire Maiden? And then Vasya says it has, but grief as well. And I just love that because, like you said, beautifully said about it being her being a juxtaposition to Vasya and Maria and Tamara, and just showing another path. And I think that that's something, I know that there's been a lot of conversation about, creating three-dimensional female characters, well-realized female characters, and that one way an author can do that is to show multiple perspectives of different female perspectives. And I feel like you get that in this trilogy, even though it's mostly centered on Vasya. We still see a lot of layers there to a lot of the other side characters, and Vavada was no exception to that. Even though she was a servant and a side character, you could tell she made that decision on her own, and she made that. It was an informed decision. It was an aware decision. So I really appreciate that section.
Yeah, I think it would be easy to make, especially side characters or any character, when you're trying to quote unquote make a point, that it's easy to create characters that are caricatures, and that even with Varvara, like there's a complexity there that I really appreciate, and it's, yes, she shows an option and a path, but that's not her entire character, if that makes sense. So
yeah, and I like the way it kind of shows Olga's power. Like, you saw it in the second one too, but I really love that you see kind of Olga has a different type of power, and she's kind of established a place for herself. And it's nice when you see, like, I love the strong female characters that are out there, like going into battle and doing stuff like that. But it's also really nice to see strong female characters within like that social structure and how she makes a place for herself.
Yeah, there are a variety and a myriad of ways to be strong, and I think I mentioned this in the first book's live show discussion, how there's this idea that to have a strong female character, and I think Hillary from Bookborn, she's got a whole series about strong female characters that she started, that to be a strong female character, you have to have masculine traits, and I think Arden established Vasya from the first book as a strong female character who has feminine, traditionally feminine traits. She is nurturing. She is, I don't want to say that kind is a feminine trait, but like kindness can be seen as a weakness. But she is kind. She is nurturing. She has like, yes, she does like ride horses and run around in the trees and stuff like that, but she's not basically a man in a female like form, if that makes sense.
Yeah. And even though she does utilize, of course, the whole girl acting like a boy trope, she still maintains Vasya. She maintains, she's just still so consistent. And I think that was actually one thing, showing her growth and showing that nurturing side. I think that was in one way in which Maria's character and even her stepsister, and I cannot remember her name, but you do see how I love it, because I see Vasya as the little sister to Olga. I see Vasya as the aunt, the loving aunt to her niece, to Maria. I see her as the granddaughter. I see her as the strong sort of partner to Morosco, or so there are just so many dimensions to her. And so but Vasya is not, and I did comment on Hillary's channel, and she so kindly posted my comment on her second video about straying away from the idea of strong female character and going more towards layered or complex female characters, because nobody is one positive quality all the time, and not even Vasya. Even if we look at her overall as being strong, I mean, she has moments of vulnerability. She has moments of weakness. She makes mistakes. There are a lot of other, she's wild. She has a wildness to her. And I think that's just as much a part of her as anything else. And so, I think that those things are just beautifully conveyed in her character, in the depth of who she is. Just such beautiful depth of character work in this trilogy.
Yeah, and I think more than just Vasya, like especially on reread Olga, I feel like there is this idea that if in society, at least in Western society, in U.S. society, that if you want to be a mother, that makes you less of a woman, like or less of a strong woman. Like that if you want to be kind of feed into those traditional female roles, that makes you less than. But Olga, she is a mother. She is and she's literally willing to sacrifice herself for her child. And I don't know, I just love the way that she portrayed all the aspects of femininity, and with such nuance and grace. And I just, I love that.
Yeah, and even Dunya, because Dunya, I mean, she could be seen as the archetype of the old crone, but I loved Dunya. I loved her. I thought she was just a beautiful person.
Yeah.
And she was also not perfect and not perfectly wise, but she was challenged, and you saw the way she was challenged. I guess I should say it that way. And just amazing the way she brought dimension to all these different aspects. Yeah.
And Dunya also shows how you can be motherly without necessarily being biological mother, which is another very important theme for women that is not respected enough, in my opinion, because there's also the opposite point of view. Either you are not enough of a strong woman if you comply with the expectation of being a mother and a wife or whatever. On the other end, you are not enough of a woman if you do anything that is not being a mother or anything else. Basically, if you're a woman, you're fucked and you're wrong regardless. I'm sorry, I was not supposed maybe to swear, but basically that's the point. And I love that we have both the choices and even more, because we have several different options for those choices, and all of them are extremely complex, layered, and badass, and beautifully strong.
I agree, Urza. Like, ideally, we should be able to just talk about great characters, regardless of, oh, this is a great female character. Like, great characters are great characters.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But it was important too that because this is historical fantasy, so I think it is important to show those aspects as well, or talk about them, because obviously there's a lot of patriarchy in this trilogy too. So I think it is kind of also a conversation that just has to be had.
Yeah.
Unfortunately.
We also kind of get a dynamic here too with her great grandmother, who just basically felt betrayed and abandoned her daughters, just locked them out, and was the complete opposite of all of these nurturing mother figures that we see.
Yeah. And she kind of, doesn't she offer her, it's like, oh, stay in the house and I'll teach you? Which Vasya winds up, I think it's, would you say that the ending is open-ending or open-ended? There you go.
Kind of.
Do you think it's pretty close?
I mean, I found it to have potential. Like, it sounded as though she was going to go back and try and stay with her great grandmother and learn. So that felt like it could open up into more things, but it also ended in a clean way that it's not necessarily a part of the story we need to see.
Right.
Yes.
I can't remember. Was Mario going back to Baba Yaga? I know it was at least Vasya.
She did speak of it.
Yeah.
I don't feel it felt like something definitive, though. While the offer that she made felt definitive, and Vasya chose to keep on pursuing whatever she felt was right for her. And once she had completed her task, let's call it, she could go back and learn more, find out more, and try new things. And that's the beauty of it, I think, that she wanted to basically try her best to give a balance and some ways to coexist for two different worlds, because I think that's one of the most powerful messages of the entire series, how different minded people can coexist. And I feel that was wrapped up with the ending, and then she can go off and do whatever she is curious to do. So I felt that it was open in that way but closed in the other one.
Yeah. I loved how she brought, to almost sound like Star Wars, she brought a balance to this world of men and the charity. And what was it? For there must always be a land for charity, witches and for sorcerers and for followers of the forest. And she has the agreement with Dimitri that
Yeah, that's a good
Mhm.
point, because there's a part, well, let's see if I can find my notes, where when she decides to fight, it's not so much, it's fighting for the land that bore us, man and devil. Oh, that's actually Sasha who says that. I'm sorry. The land that bore us, man and devil, like not for Moscow, not for Dmitri even, but more for the land. And I guess that's where she and Sasha kind of join forces there. But anyway, I guess I'm kind of off though. Vasya doesn't say that. Sasha says that.
No, but he has a bit of the powers and the abilities that Vasya has, because he can kind of see like shadows and stuff like that, and he has the potential there. Because
even more, yeah, he also shares the same beliefs that Vasya has, that two different minded worlds can coexist. And that's the most beautiful thing to me, because their relationship, it was so close and their goals were so similar, and I thought it was absolutely, I love them.
Yeah.
I don't want to think about whatever.
One of my favorite quotes in this book is speaking of the coexist theme, was one in which she is basically saying that men are also wicked, but comparing men and charity to one another, and basically saying that God rules the next world, but what of this one? Men may seek salvation and also make offerings to the heart spirits to keep their houses safe from evil. Did not God make charity as he made everything else in heaven and earth? So kind of just showing this connection between the two worlds.
Yes.
But at the end, I personally loved that Sasha, he didn't change. He stayed consistent with his religion, and even into the afterlife, and that Vasya respected him and he respected her. And the way that ended, for me, that was the major ending point for me. Like that was, of course, everything else was perfect, like, with the Solveig coming back and everything. But for me, it was just showing this message that these things can coexist, and that there can be a sort of harmony there, that there can be a love there. And I just found that so beautiful, because I think in this particular generation, there are a lot of people who grew up in very religious households, and some of those households maintain their religious ideologies, while some members of their families may not. And the fact that there can be a respect of differences in that, but no love lost. And I guess that's how I see this trilogy.
Yeah. I couldn't have put it any better. Just because I know that people need to either go to bed or, in my case, get coffee. Any final thoughts? I know there's so much more stuff that we haven't even gone over. I could talk probably for weeks or months about this series and never tire of it, but any final thoughts?
Okay.
My question would be, what is people's favorite book in the trilogy?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Should we go around?
So I'm gonna be the political one and be like, they each have their
yes, of
their
course.
nice things.
I can't choose between my children.
Pretty much.
Yeah.
I can.
Oh, I can too.
No, I think so, and I hope that I didn't establish like the wrong expectations when I was like all excited about this read along. Is that the first book is very comparatively slow, and it's more character focused, and it's very much very, I mean, the entire trilogy is atmospheric, but you really get the depth of it in that first book. In the second book, you are truly expanding the world, and you get more of the world of men. And the third book, I feel like it has elements of both the first and the second, and which kind of gives you the dual ending type thing of the magical world, this fantastical world, and then this world of men. I can't.
And that's why I would choose book 3, because for me it has a little bit of book 1 and a little bit of book 2, but I would still choose them all if I did not have to choose one, and I don't have to. So that's bad.
You
I
know,
just-
it's interesting because I watched, of course, your discussion for book 2, your group discussion, and it seemed like a lot of people in that group seemed to think, couldn't it have just ended at book 2? And I was watching that thinking, no way. This book
No way.
resolved. It brought together so many things. I felt that
Mhm.
had come together.
Come on, Angela.
But that
What about
also
you,
speaks
Kayla?
to the strength
Just
of
flip a coin.
Catherine's writing too, that she can write such strong books. Each one is very strong in and of itself, and I think that just speaks to the power of her as a writer.
Yeah, and I think there's also like not necessarily a building from one book to the next, but it's a very much, they're all woven together that I think without one, the rest fail. If that makes sense. So, by the way, in case you guys didn't know, there was also a Winternight Trilogy discussion on World Hoppers. I don't think I left a link to it down below, but after we're done being live here, I'll leave a link down below for future reference. So if you want just a general overview of the Winternight Trilogy and you don't want to sit through 3+ hours of discussions about the individual books, that is also an option. But yeah, so
the previous 2 videos of these are so good.
Mhm.
And, especially hearing Igor's insights and all that sort of stuff has just been amazing.
By the way, Igor, if you're watching this after the fact, we're
Yes.
thinking about you.
For sure.
Yeah, any other final thoughts, Kayla?
I mean, I think this one was definitely my favorite out of the 3, just because of how everything comes together, all the different dynamics that we get to see, not to mention the emotional damage that occurs in multiple instances.
Emotional damage.
I was in denial for the first half of this book. That's all I have to say. But yeah, I just think it's beautifully portrayed and something that I just need to go back and reread again, because there's, even talking with all of you guys here, there's so much that I didn't think of, or hearing from different perspectives, it just adds more layers to it.
Yeah.
I mean, I did read this entire trilogy twice within a 12-month period, so
It's acceptable.
if that is indicative of anything, there you go.
Maybe one of the things that we did not get to touch upon that is probably one of my favorites, besides everything that we already talked about, is the theme and the aspect of folklore that happen in the series, and how beautiful and recognizable and true they are. And I know my folklore that has some Slavic influences, but it made me feel at home in an odd way. I think the Winternight Trilogy is the only thing with the Lord of the Rings that when I read it, it makes me feel at home. And it's just the way that he was able to give me everything and more that I could have ever wished for. So I just wanted to praise that for a second.
I'm not Slavic, and I have exactly the same feelings of
Yeah, I'm not
like,
Slavic either, but just quick
come-
thing, in the mountains here in the Dolomites was basically a weird melting pot of Slavic cultures, Celtic cultures, Norse cultures, German cultures, and Italian cultures. And so the legends that belong to this
So
specific
cool.
area are a weird mix of many things, and some are just physically identical, just a little bit changed, like the Snegorachka one. We have one here in the Dolomites that they call a legend of the Dolomites, but actually probably it's not really of the Dolomites, it's just readapted or something. So a lot of things and themes and ways of dealing with it felt somewhat familiar while different.
Yeah.
I don't know if that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. What about you, Roger? Any final thoughts?
I would just say that I was really impressed by the emotional impact that she was able to punch with not having to have 1,000-page tomes. I was able to feel for these characters in 400 or 500 pages, which doesn't usually happen for me.
Yeah.
I think it was like a masterclass in how to kind of blend folklore and give you enough information, but not too much. Like, it was just...
Chef's kiss.
I agree. Like, it was, because I like quite fast-paced books in fantasy. Like, big dense tomes just are too much for me. And I think that the pacing throughout this whole entire trilogy was just on point. The atmosphere was on point. It was beautiful and magical and lyrical and all of the things. I also loved the lore. The Midnight, what's it called again? The
Midnight Road.
Lane to Midnight?
Yeah, Midnight Road. Actually reminded me of Māori lore in the underworld. So I found that very interesting. I was like, this is very similar, except in Māori mythology, it's not seasonal. But other than that, it's very similar. And it made me think of home, because I don't live in my home country. And it just reminded me of home. That's cool. Yeah, I loved the series so much.
Kate, Joanna, any final thoughts?
I think all I'll say in addition to what I've already said is, a couple things is that, one, I think that Catherine Arden, I'm the opposite of you, Lana. I actually tend to prefer a more of a slow burn, more lyric. I guess, I struggle a little bit with more modern fantasy these days, I guess, as a result of that. I like to feel like I can breathe in the books that I'm reading. But at the same time, I still felt like the pacing was fantastic. And I love Catherine Arden's atmosphere. I know that people say that all the time when they talk about her writing, but it's not only just in her ways of creating the world, it's the ways in which she makes me feel things. When I'm reading her text, I feel things all the time. And that's something I really, really appreciate about this trilogy. And in addition to it, kind of like I said already, being kind of like a love letter to those of us who were maybe brought up in very religious households and still have love and respect to loved ones who still follow those religions, but maybe see things in a different way, and sort of showing how there's just the whole theme of coexisting. I think that that's beautiful. In addition to so many other themes and family and loyalty and magic and fear and all these wonderful themes. I think that it's just amazing the way she blended so many different elements together in such a cohesive, beautifully written trilogy. So thanks for having me.
Yeah, I agree with pretty much everything that's been said. I think for me, again, I just love the way she weaves in the historical detail and like how much you feel like you're there with Vasya and all the family relationships. Like, that family is huge to me. So I really love the way she handled that. I still can't believe this was the first series that she ever wrote, because it just blows my mind. But thank you for having me as well. It was amazing to talk about.
Yes. And thank you all for joining. I know it's super early or super late. We're literally around the world here. So thank you so much for joining on camera, in chat. And I was really nervous when I announced this read-along. I was like, no one's going to join. And then I think it was successful. I really enjoyed it. It warmed my heart seeing everybody come to it anew and reading it for the first time or reading it again and loving it. And it just makes me so happy. Again, so I said at the start, I'm going to be doing a giveaway of the Fairy Loot editions of... I'm not going to show my address, but it's unopened, just saying, just letting you know, of the Fairy Loot editions of the Winternight Trilogy. They're not signed. Don't get too excited. If you're watching this later, it ends on March 5th, okay? So that's when I will be doing the giveaway. So if you're watching this after, I'm sorry. Bad timing. And then we are also going to be starting a read-along of the Seven Waters trilogy, starting with Daughter of the Forest in March. That'll be with Sarah and Yolene, trying to figure out if we're going to do the similar things of discussions and stuff like that. But anyways, there is that. Again, thank you, everyone. I just love this trilogy so much, and I'm so happy that you guys loved it as well. And I hope this discussion was as fulfilling and as great for you guys as it was for me. So with that, I will end the broadcast. Have a great day.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you.